Lonely Monk Productions. Do you like storytelling? Or do you like me? Well, join me on April 27th at Caveat in New York City on the Lower East Side as I share a true story from my life on the show Risk. Created and hosted by my former guest and my pal Kevin Allison, Risk is the live show and weekly podcast where people tell true stories they never thought they'd dare to share in public. And here's a tip. Tickets are available now for $18 if you purchase them in advance, or, $20 at the door if you wait until the day of. Can't make it to New York but still want to catch the show? Well, the night is being live streamed via Stellar, and those tickets are only $15. Visit www.risk-show/tour for more details. That's www.risk-show/tour. Hope to see you there. I don't know if y'all have heard Overrated by Kenya Vaughn yet, but yo!
That's my Jawn! Hey yo, displace the guilt.
What's good, friends and family, neighbors, near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I'm your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. Jawn Johns, the Martian Jawn Hunter, a.k.a. Nate 3.0. Back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I'm joined for a conversation by Taylor Goldsmith of the band Dawes. We talk about a great deal, and I cannot wait to share it with you. That's coming up in a bit. But first, hello, my friends. Welcome back to the show. Or welcome to the show if you're joining us for the first time. I've been seeing in the numbers that each week we've been hitting the ears of a lot of new cats and kittens. And oh man, that warms the heart. I love this show and I love the opportunities it affords me to chat with creators about the arts and the obsessions that they are so passionate about. And that's the important thing to me, sharing with you the cool things that are out here being created that maybe you might not know about. Or maybe you do and you just want to learn some more about it. Either way, that's reminding me, if you did not know, on the website, www.yothat'smyjawn.com, there are pages for every episode of this podcast, every single one. And supplemental to each episode, those pages have links to each guest and their music or their films or their reels or whatever their art may be. It's there. So if you find yourself digging the conversation I have with a guest and you want to experience or interact with the art that they create, you can do so on the website. Also up on the website is a link to our merchandise store. Click the shop link and you can get yourself a fine t-shirt or, whatever. And then a few coins from those sales goes back into supporting the show. We have a new shirt design that just went up this weekend, which is a mock-up of the Return of the Jedi teaser poster entitled Return of the Jawn. You see what I did there? Yeah, man. It's cool. We have some dope designs up there, so go. Help yourself. And of course, while you're on the webpage, sign on up for the mailing list, get the updates, and follow us on the socials at Yo, That's My Jawn. Okay, I have a dope conversation to share with you today, and the only thing standing in the way of that is me blathering on. So, we're going to take a very short break, and then we will be back with my interview with Taylor Goldsmith. Yo, That's My Jawn is brought to you by Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Take a seat. Let me explain. It's free. It costs nothing. $0 and 0 cents. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Me? I'm doing this from my iPad. It's that simple. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more podcast providers. What's that mean? That means when someone says, hey, how do I find your podcast? You go, you ever hear of a little app called Spotify? Boom, it's there. What's that in your hand, an iPhone? Boom, go to your podcast app. I'm there. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Right from the beginning, straight out the gate, you can make money. Season 1 made me so much money, I could afford a cup of coffee at Starbucks. A grande. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm. My guest today is a singer, songwriter, guitarist, producer, and is the frontman of the band Dawes. Their latest album, Misadventures of Doomscroller, is a tight 7-song adventurous new turn for the band, evincing a more ambitious and exploratory approach to recording than that represented on their earlier albums. They are currently touring the U.S. with An Evening with Dawes, featuring 2 sets from the band ranging their entire catalog. You can catch them in town here at the Fillmore on Thursday, March 16th at 8 p.m. Tickets are still available. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show Taylor Goldsmith. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Taylor Goldsmith. Taylor, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Thanks for having me.
So I have to come completely clean about something. I've actually seen you a bunch of times in concert because I'm a big supporter of WXPN. So I've seen you at the festival numerous times. But my fiance and I, we were watching the David Letterman interviews a few years back, and he dropped the May All Your Favorite Bands Stay Together at the end of an episode. And I was like, damn, that's a brilliant line. And she looked at me and she was like, you goddamn moron, that's Dawes. And I was just like, oh, right. Yeah, no, I knew that. But what does that feel like when David Letterman is quoting you on his show and stuff like that?
It's cool because it's not one of those things that you know, I don't know. It's not something that anybody hits you up beforehand about. It's not like there's any reason for David Letterman or David Letterman's team to let anybody know he's going to say that. He just says it. And so I don't remember which episode it was. I don't know if it was the Kanye episode or the Seinfeld episode, but someone texted us the new TV show of Letterman. He quotes you guys. So it was out in the world by the time we ever even heard about it. And then to find out that he did it a few times with different interviews was the coolest feeling. I mean, we'd crossed paths with him in the past, but someone like him, not only a late night host, but the late night host for so long. We never really, when he would say things on camera, yeah, the Dawes guys are here, we never really felt like that meant that he knew who we were. Because sometimes they don't, and that's totally reasonable. They have different artists in every day. How can they really keep up? But then to hear him quoting a line from one of our songs, meant the world to us. It was the coolest thing, and it's like, oh, I guess he was clocking us when we came back.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then he put the song on the title playlist that he put together too. And I'm just
that's cool.
And I'm like, that's just so amazing. I couldn't imagine, my head would explode because I don't know if you can gather this from the fact that I interview people, but Letterman, Carson, those guys were all my guys, I grew up obsessed with that. So I just couldn't even imagine. It's so cool.
It was so surreal. And then there was a private talk between Little Stevie from the E Street Band and Bruce Springsteen to talk about Little Stevie's book that came out. And we, this was way after the fact that we found out, because it was a private thing. There was no cameras or anything. And someone let us know, at one point in the conversation, Bruce just started saying, there's this band, they have this line, all your favorite bands stay together, may all your favorite bands stay together by Dawes. And they really encapsulate what it feels like to blah, blah, blah. And Bruce Springsteen just goes off on our song, and we had no idea that he was aware of us at all, let alone to that extent. So it's another one of those moments for us of this feels so surreal.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's better than any award, better than anything. When one of the masters of the field is hey, this is a great song, that's just.
Yeah, I mean, because the reality is that's who you're talking to anyway. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about this, where he was feeling some down on where his career's at as a musician, and yet the other day, like my brother and him were walking through some art installation or something, and a lot of people were coming up to him being like, I'm a really big fan of your music, and he acknowledged it to me. He's like, I know that they were saying that, but it's just so hard to pick that up. It's so hard to accept that. That negative bias in our brains immediately wants to just cancel it by saying, well, they probably have bad taste, and that's why they think I'm okay, or they probably are one of 1,000 people, and this is crazy luck that they would find me. Like, there's just so many ways to resist letting someone in, and if that's the case, if we can't accept that, and we also can't accept it when you're just given a bunch of, not this has happened to Dawes, but those artists that are given a bunch of money and like given a bunch of fans and big stages, and they still can't find that joy or that peace or that contentment. If both of those things aren't scratching the itch, if you're not in the right headspace, I think that the one thing that it always does is the fact that this music that we make, like you doing what you do, it is somewhat of a message to Carson and a message to Letterman, and what I do is somewhat of a message to Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and Bruce Springsteen. And so for them to at all acknowledge it, and to see that, hey, you inspired me, and now I'm kind of like ping ponging it back to see what you think, if you ever even hear of who I am. You're right. It means more than the biggest venue sold out. It means more than the most albums sold. It's not all about like just pleasing your heroes necessarily, but we do this stuff to just feel seen in the world. And if it's by the people that showed us how to do it in the first place, it really resonates.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's funny because I used to have a small, very, very small music career, but I was the same way as your friend. Like, people would come up and it was always, to me, the old Groucho Marx. I never wanted to be a member of a club that would have me, and that's what it was. Like, oh yeah, he likes me. Of course he likes me, but what about that person? Why don't they like? Yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, like I was dealing with that the other day. We had sold like 1,300 tickets at a venue in a city that like a good market for us. And any day of the week, that should be amazing for anybody. And yet, because that venue has like a 3,000 person capacity, I was like, man, that's not even 50%. Like, immediately I started reframing the equation to beat myself up with it.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody is spared from that. I think we all find ways to talk ourselves out of accepting good things.
Yeah.
and unless we practice, unless we get, I mean, obviously, like children, spouses, like beautiful moments, and they're impossible to resist, and they do bring things quite into focus. But when we're sort of like off our tether, and when I'm out of the house away from my children that put everything into perspective, it is easy for me to go down those wormholes.
Yeah. And, it's weird, like doing this podcast and stuff like that. One of the things, like, this was birthed out of the pandemic, as so much was. And like, it was very, like, I took that time to kind of find myself and to just appreciate things. And that's what all of this started for. Like, I just wanted to show people that I appreciate them, and I wanted to talk to them about the things they create that I appreciate. But like, slowly as we move away from the pandemic, then it's like, then I start looking at the numbers, and I'm like, all right, now the numbers aren't moving, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I have to like keep coming back to like just refocus on, wait, no, that's not what this is about. So go back to the heart of it.
And it's weird because in some respect, that voice inside of our heads is what helps us stay ambitious. It is what helps us stay focused. It does help us self-preserve. Like when I look at like a venue that's not selling as well as another one or something, it's not because like I simply want to play to a packed house. I mean, that sounds fun, but that's not what it's about. What it's about is survival. And I'm looking for any indicators that might suggest that is slipping away. And if it is the case, then I should act accordingly. But like we're saying, your brain is telling you to fear things that aren't worth fearing. And like, and so it's like, I love that voice that tells me, all right, we're playing at the Beacon Theater tonight. What's the next one? I like it, but I can't let that be the only voice in my head. I have to hear that one and then be like, yeah, that would be great to play Radio City someday. That'd be great to play MSG someday. But the other voice in my head is saying like, but to 14-year-old Taylor Goldsmith, the idea of playing here tonight is the greatest thing that could have ever happened. Like full stop.
Yep. Yep. And it's a beautiful segue because I always like to take it back to childhood. When you were growing up, like what kind of music was playing around the house? What were your folks into?
My dad was a real disciple of R&B and soul and funk. And so when we were growing up, we would go see him play and sing with bands around LA, and he would invite us onto stage. My brother's our drummer, so he'd invite us both onto stage, and that's kind of how we learned. And some of his older musician pals hated it. They didn't like having the kids up to clunk around. But it taught us to think on our feet. It taught us to watch a band, and that was really helpful. And it's funny because of the diet that our dad had us on, it was like Otis matters, James Brown matters, but maybe the Beatles matter, but the Bob Dylan definitely doesn't matter, and Grateful Dead definitely doesn't matter. And so as I got older and I was starting to find my own thing that I responded to, probably by accident, probably also in some respects as a reaction to where my dad was coming from, I did find those artists. And my dad's a really sweet, open-minded person. So when I was like, no, Dad, really listen to what this Dylan song does, or listen to what this Grateful Dead solo does, he would, he's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And now he's into it. But it was that I was really late to that stuff because I when you're young enough and you have a cool dad, like I was lucky enough to have, what he said was what the truth was. And so I loved Steely Dan and I loved just like slick, funky stuff. And then of course I was a normal kid too. So I liked popular music, at the time. I mean, I sometimes joke that I sort of failed being a kid in the 90s, because I had this opportunity to really dig Nirvana, really dig Pearl Jam, really dig REM, Pavement. And instead I just was like a TRL kid, and I dug like Third Eye Blind and Matchbox 20, and not that stuff's doesn't have its place in the world, but that I could have just like the things that now I'm obsessed with, was actually being released while I was like old enough to be informed by it. And I just was letting it all go by while I watched TRL and Carson Daly. And so it's funny more than anything else, but it's something that all the stuff that really, really meant a lot to me. I just feel like I was in that respect a real late bloomer. Elvis Costello, David Bowie, Rolling Stones, all this stuff wasn't really clicking until I was early 20s. Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell being the number one in on my Mount Rushmore. It just like I wasn't really that aware.
Yeah. What was it that clicked when you finally made that switch, when you abandoned the TRL-ness of it all?
Yeah. Well, that was just, I think, getting a little older. I think, going from 14 to 15 and all of a sudden being like, wait, this Steely Dan stuff and this Queen stuff was, I like it more, or David Brubeck or whatever it was. I like this more than that. And it's just as simple as that. But then like I was into this sort of beefy musical stuff, and I was obsessed with Queen, and I was obsessed with just the more chords, the more notes, the faster, the more impressed I was. My criteria for what I liked was, in my opinion now, kind of warped. And then I actually met this producer, Tony Berg. And all through this time I was like shoulder to shoulder with my partner in crime, Blake Mills. And we kind of learned music together. So we were kind of on the same path with the Steely Dans and the Queens and all that stuff. And when we met Tony Berg, he was like, don't get into that. Like, check out, like, Queen's cool, but you need to understand why Bowie is Bowie. And in my mind, at that point, I was like 19. I was like, but David Bowie can't sing as high as Freddie Mercury, so why would I like that more? And he was like, and don't listen, like Steely Dan's fine, but listen to the Rolling Stones. And I would think, but Steely Dan has way more notes in their chords and they're way funkier. So why would I rather listen to the Stones? And through his education, basically, I was able to understand why those artists are those artists. And it also taught me very distinctly the sanctity of a song, why a song can go way beyond what a instrumentalist or just a vocalist can do. And that's when I fell in love with, like, I went from, like, to put it in a succinct way, I went from being a Paul guy to a Jawn guy. and that happened, like, I was around 2021, and all of a sudden the guys that I was obsessed with were guys like Lou Reed, people that couldn't even tune their guitar, let alone play it, and then guys that couldn't sing in tune. But there was something, I was all of a sudden understanding people's essence. I was able to it was less about being impressed and more about feeling like I know someone intimately. I know Lou Reed intimately, or at least he's allowed me to feel like I do. And that's that became the guiding light for what else I looked for. So by the time 23 came around and our first band broke up and Blake decided he didn't want to tour anymore and Dawes was starting, I realized, like, oh, I want these songs to be about something. I want to potentially do for a listener what Lou Reed or what Leonard Cohen has done for me, just through words, not through acrobatics.
Yeah.
And that's when Dawes started, basically, like, right at that moment. So it was kind of a serendipitous few years where one band was ending and one band was starting, and I was changing very dramatically.
It's really interesting to hear that because, like, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, like, you're very lyrical. So to know that your initial kind of want was more kind of how many notes can I cram in this, as opposed to, like, because I do think that, but, you know, looking at Doomscroller, it's kind of like you found the perfect way to marry both of those kind of concepts in your work.
That's cool to hear you say that. I mean, like, I think, you know, when we were making our first handful of records, I was able to do this, like, okay, I can have this song have these 3 chords, and we could all just kind of we could just be as economical as possible and let that be the song. And as time has gone on, not that doesn't sustain careers. I mean, I look at so many songwriters and that's all that they ever do, and they're my favorite stuff. So it's not like it can't sustain itself. But I just found, for me, you know, the place that Dawes really exists most of all is not really on Spotify. It's not really in record sales. It's really on a stage. It's really in front of our fans playing live. And so when we make records, I'm thinking, how are we going to get these songs in the set? And if I'm doing these mid-tempo 3-chord almost ballads, we already have a lot of that, and I can't do that Western Skyline anymore and have anyone care. Why would they, you know? So I have to find ways to, like, find vehicles for these lyrics that feel, you know, like they're appropriate, like the music matches the sentiment, but also ways that can fit on the stage. And it is true, like, the education continued, you know, like, I went from the Lou Reeds and the Leonard Cohens, and then, you know, you find your way through all sorts of stuff, very modern stuff, very, very old stuff. And then in these last few years, especially during the pandemic, the 3 things I listened to almost most of all was Herbie Hancock, Frank Zappa, and Black Sabbath. And I thought, like, oh, you can take songs, like, songs can be whatever you want them to be, and you can bring so many different elements. And I don't ever want to lose my relationship to writing words. That's definitely the most satisfying part of this whole thing for me. But I can dress them up different. I can have fun. I don't have to be some folksy guy all the time. And so, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I just kind of gave myself permission. How do we do more? Like, rather than thinking minimalist, how do we think maximalist and have it still be okay? And now any of these songs from Doomscroller, I think I can speak for the fans too. They're the highlights of the show because they're so freaky with what we do as performers, that there's all these ups and downs and tempo changes and key changes and just things that happen. It's not just verses and choruses. And so it's cool to feel like, oh, like the thing that we thought was going to be this experimental moment is actually being rewarded. And now they can go anywhere in the show.
Yeah. And, it is funny to me that it is following the pandemic, because like the material that comes before it could almost work in solitude, on an acoustic guitar with one person. But like this new album is like a celebration of being a band almost. Like it's just got that kind of nature to it.
You're nailing it. I mean, that was definitely what was going through our heads. Like I missed playing guitar really loud desperately. I missed having the drums blow my ears out desperately. And I didn't think I was going to miss it. I took a lot of it for granted the last few years before the pandemic. I would be bummed to be away from home so much, and it's still hard, especially now that there's kids around. But I just wasn't in. And then once it was taken away, and this happened for everyone in some way, shape, or form. But once it was all taken away, then it felt very much like, oh, this means so much to me, and this is I identify myself to a large extent with this, and I need it back, and I miss it, and I won't take it for granted again. And so yeah, it is a love letter to playing on stage. It is a love letter to long guitar solos, and whatever solos. But yeah, it's definitely a celebration of being in a band. I couldn't have put it better.
It's really awesome. And then as like kind of the companion piece to it, the album that you and Mandy's album that you guys worked on, is like the perfect 1-2 punch of like, just kind of your sensibility. I think like, it's just a really, and it's just beautiful. Like, and you guys had a kid last year. Like what a busy 2022 you guys had. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Now we have a 3-month-old too. We have 2 kids now. Went into the pandemic with no kids. Now we have 2 kids, and yeah, I mean that means a lot. That you said that about her album. I love that album, and we loved getting to tour it. It was a wild tour. We had at the time our 7-month-old with us, and Mandy was pregnant with Ozzy, and it was extreme. I mean, it was a time where a lot of buses were spoken for. Everyone was on tour at once, so we had this bus. The driver was the best guy. I really liked him a lot, and it's not a criticism on him or the company, but everyone had buses, and so ours was just kind of this really rattly one. And our poor Gus, 7 months old, trying to help him understand why he was going to be sleeping on this fucking roller coaster, and him just waking up at 6 a.m, just kind of like, what's going on? But ironically, he slept better than most of us. He definitely slept better than his mom, and she was pregnant. And so it was sort of like, we had so much fun on the shows, but it was definitely the hardest tour I've ever been on, which is funny because it wasn't even my tour.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I mentioned WXPN. We were all bummed in 2021 when you guys had to pull out because of COVID. But
I got COVID. I actually didn't get it, but the other 3 or 4 of the crew and band, they all got it all at the same time. It sucked.
It does. It's such a drag. Like, what has that kind of touring been like with that kind of just looming out there? Is it something that you have to think about, or are we at a point where you're kind of just like, it's the reality of life now, and that's just what we have to?
I think it's the reality of life. I think we have to be responsible to the extent that we can to protect each other. But I think that's shifting, and it's definitely not up to me. I'm not, Jason Isbell going on CNN, and I'm kind of following guys like that's lead, like that's not my style to pave the way. Even though I love him for that, but I think that I'm hoping it becomes ingrained into the experience. I mean, I'll be honest, in 2018, if I got the flu, I would sing. I would just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's messed up or not, I think I could speak for all musicians. Anybody would have done it. And now we're thinking about it differently, and I'm cool with that too. I will say that the business model won't really work unless people are more willing to let this just be a part of the equation. I mean, you go to shows now and you might see someone there in a mask, and or someone in the band in a mask. That probably means they're sick. And I think, in my opinion, it's like let's just whether or not it's comfortable now, let's work towards that being comfortable. Just so that tours don't have to stop. Because if tours keep getting canceled because people get sick, which again, it's not my place to say if that's right or wrong. I don't think people will be able to tour.
Right.
Like we have to get to a place where it's just okay. Obviously you don't want to spray COVID all over everybody. So I know that there's lines to draw, and where you draw that line is up to you. But I also think there's a complicity with being a fan. Like, I got a front row seat to the show. It's in a closed space. My safety is not can't be guaranteed. It's just whether that's a fan or someone in the band. It's just the way things are now. I don't have a underlying issue. There's so many factors.
Yeah.
But it's definitely fascinating, and we're definitely all watching to see how it unfolds. But the cool thing about it is that it's all unfolding naturally without anybody else needing to make a decision about it. Nobody is insisting upon culture digesting this a certain way. It's just happening. What was okay a year ago might be okay now. What's not okay now might be okay in a year, and nobody is going to have to make the actual decision. It's just going to take care of itself.
Yeah, no, it's very well said. Very well said. What has the post-pandemic crowds been like? Because I notice when I go to shows, I mention this a lot, that people got weird. Like like it's almost like they've it was only a year and a half, 2 years, but everyone forgot how to interact with each other. But how?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's weird. It's like it's fascinating because when we as the guy in the band, it felt like, oh, well, when shows come back, we're going to be more thrilled than ever. All of us, fans and musicians alike. It's going to be insane. And it just hasn't been. And the ticket counts are down across the entire industry. There's a lot of factors there. It's not just COVID. It's inflation. It's the fact that people have had a wonky situation with their careers for the last few years. So there's a lot of factors. But COVID's a big part of it. People are a little uncomfortable, I think, or some of them are. But I look forward to there being a point where people can just celebrate it again, like they did. I mean, I do, and I don't have less fun. That's for sure. Like, yeah, some cities there might be less people in the room than other cities, or than other years, I should say. And like we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, I have to resist the urge to read into that. But I also it's something that's everywhere right now, but it does create a different kind of intimacy. It does create a different connection with the folks that do come. There's something, and it's weird to have it be our health, but it's almost like the what it takes to make the decision to go to the show. The stakes are higher. And therefore the ones of us that are there are just a little more committed to that decision. It wasn't like, oh, it's Tuesday and Dawes is here. It is 2023 and I'm still going to fucking go. And I can feel that energy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it so much more. Live music, like the first show I went back to, I legitimately cried at. I played some shows over the pandemic, and they were like live shows. But the stage was so distant from where the people were, these outdoor shows and all. And like just being able to connect as a musician and being able to connect as an audience member, I definitely do not take it for granted anymore. Like I love it so much, and it could have. I didn't know that I was ever going to experience it again. Like it was scary.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that. I mean, the shows that we tried to put together during the pandemic were funny. We did a couple of those drive-in shows where at the end of a song, people just flick their lights or honk their horns. It just felt like you were like playing a live show to a Pixar movie or something. But yeah, it was fine. And I'm glad we got to do that, but it was not anything close to getting back into a proper venue and doing our thing again.
Yeah, I mean, because it really is. It's about connection and communication and just, vibes and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
it was something that literally took away vibes.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's true.
Back to Doom Scroller, one of the things that I read you saying was that you guys were kind of cognizant of the length of a vinyl when crafting it, which is something I appreciate so much because I feel like that kind of restraint of two sides, 40 to 45 minutes, is kind of like forces you to just put together the tightest, most precise things. There's no sprawling. There's no like kind of, let's just try this in the studio and add it. Did you find that freeing to kind of have that constraint?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to me, they're very different kinds of music, but I can wrap my head easier around like Kind of Blue, which is 5 songs and it's 40 minutes or so, than I can for like a 20-song Elvis Costello record. I love like a song like an album like Get Happy, which I have memorized. I love that album, but it took me a lot longer to feel like I really grasped it. Or something like Wish You Were Here, which is again 5 songs. Even though there are 14-minute songs on Wish You Were Here, I still feel like a full listening experience allows me to just I can digest that easier than I can a 12-minute 40-minute album. So it's kind of counterintuitive because you think like, oh, that's a 12-minute song. This is going to be hard. But by the end of it, the first time I listened to that, I felt like I knew how that album works. Felt like I could like see it, And I think that probably goes for most fans. I think people don't give themselves enough credit. I think we can grasp long songs. It's not a big deal. And so yeah, that was a consideration where like even though this is less even though these are longer songs, I felt like it was more digestible than say Good Luck with Whatever, which was 10 songs. They were more closer between like 4 and 5 minutes or 3 and 5 minutes or whatever. Whatever. That doesn't matter one way or the other. I'm super proud of both, but it was important to not, for me, in this record particularly, I mean, this might change as time goes on, but I didn't want to do a bunch of 8 to 10 minute songs and then also do a 10 song album. Yeah. I felt like that would have been just really hard to have anybody develop a relationship with it, at least in the short term. So yeah, I think our North Star was really jazz. Like I think like all those jazz records that we love, whether it's like more fusiony stuff like Herbie or Monk or Davis, like there's it's always 4, 5, 6 songs, and because the track number is so few, it allows them to just go wherever they want it to go and have the end of that listening experience feel like not completely overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you had mentioned earlier, like, loving Steely Dan, like there's a bit of, Dan to the playing as well. Like it just, it's got that feel to it. Like, but I've long been arguing for people to use vinyl as kind of the constraint when thinking about albums, because like when you think about all of the great albums, like there are brilliant double albums and stuff like that, but they all fit on 2 sides, and it's concise, and there are things that didn't make the album that I think would make a Spotify album, if you're looking only at streaming or something like that.
Totally. And I think like a cool fact, like I remember reading that when Bruce Springsteen was putting together Darkness on the Edge of Town, he knew it was going to open with Badlands. He knew side A was, if I'm not mistaken, was going to end with Promised Land. Side B was going to start with Racing in the Street, and the whole album was going to end with Darkness on the Edge of Town. He knew beginnings and ends of sides A and B before he knew what goes in the meat of them. And then he was able to know, like, okay, I'm going to put Candy's Room here, and I'm going to put, and he was able to kind of figure out the rest. But whether or not someone knows that, I feel like that kind of care and curation does contribute to why that album is so effective. Someone might disagree with me or want to argue that, but I feel like what you're saying, like if you think about arcing for vinyl, you're really just thinking about how to arc it for a listening experience. That is something that has been to some degree, like, what should I say? Like not like regulated, but there's a precedent for it. Like, I feel like we have this relationship to a lot of classic albums that are right around 40 minutes. And so our brain is tuned to that, whether or not we think so. Obviously, like you said, Blonde on Blonde is a double album. Tusk is a double album. All Things Must Pass is a double album. I love all those albums, but it's a different relationship that I have with them. And when it comes to that, like, I'm going to sit down and listen to a record tonight. There's this part in the back of my brain that is assuming that means 40 minutes of attention. Yeah. And I like that. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel.
And I also think like it's kind of like almost like a not to get a little spacey here, but it's almost like fractals, right? So like, when you think about an album, or when I think about like a classic album, like it goes from note to chord to song to album. And when a lot of times people miss that last step of crafting the album. And I think something like Doomscroller is just perfectly curated and crafted, not just on the song level, but as an entire piece, and I think that's what's missing. I think that's one of the things missing from a lot of music is just that last step of putting together the album.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot. I mean, I think of like even a record like Beggar's Banquet by the Stones. I think it's perfect. But if the Stones put out Dear Doctor as like a Spotify single, it would be like, this is not them. This is weird. I don't know what this is. But in the way it plays in that album, it gives balance to Street Fighting Man and Sympathy for the Devil and Salt of the Earth. There's this real ebb and flow of that record where it seems like, whether or not they're deciding it explicitly, there seems like there's some sort of thinking that's saying, let's go big here and let's be the arena band and let's do a small little like campfire song and let those talk to each other and let those make each other better for that very reason. And now we just live in the single economy where Dear Doctor probably wouldn't have made that record. It would have probably just been like, no, let's just find another one that's some big ass Stones single and put that 10 times in a row, which is cool. I love those songs. But it doesn't arc an album, like you're saying. It doesn't help balance something. Because like Street Fighting Man is so great because there's only one of them on that album. I just think about that all the time, and I don't think that that's a thought about thing anymore. And it's also I think our brains have been sort of rewired to. I don't think we would even accept it as listeners. I think so we talk about these classic records, and there's always these like goofy tunes, and I just don't know if we would allow for it anymore. Back then, they were thinking about the whole piece. Yep. Now we just think about us like what can end up on a playlist.
Yeah. The I was an enormous mixtape guy growing up, but for some reason playlists are like my antichrist almost. Like I'm just like, no, I can't. I mean, I'm starting to kind of get into them, and like and I'm doing the same thing where I'm just like I need to limit them to like 10 songs, like, because it's very easy to just be like, no, this is just everything. Just put everything on it. There's no end to it, And then it's like,
totally.
And then it's like, no, you just put the whole album on that playlist. No, I know I did, but I like all those songs.
That's all.
But one of the things I've mentioned a bunch of times here is your relationship with WXPN. You guys were actually mentioned by Dan Reed on the show a few years ago when I had him on, when we were talking about bands that the station absolutely loves and feels good about seeing succeed, as if they played a part in doing something. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with WXPN, like, because they've always been there for you guys, it seems, and you've always been there for them.
I've had there's been a bit of a pastime where when our records are done but they're not out, but like once they're mastered, I send them to Bruce Warren, and Bruce will like, send me an email back and tell me what he thinks, and it's really fun for me because it's not through managers, it's not through representatives, it's like me emailing Bruce and Bruce emailing me, and it means a lot to me, and I hope we always do that. But yeah, I think there's so many fond memories of us as a band happened at either that festival or Free at Noon, interviews with David, or even like, one of our, I don't know if it was the Passwords tour. I think it was 2018. Must have been, because our play in 2021 was canceled because of COVID. But in 2018 or 2019, when we did our Passwords tour, we played the Fillmore, which we're about to go back to, and it sold out. And for a band like us, having any tickets over 2,000 people is a crazy market for us, and there's only few that are like that. I don't know if we'll get that many this time, and that's okay. But like we did that year, and that's never happened before. And it's like, it's like three or four cities that we can do that in, and Philly's right at the top of that list. And I think it is definitely thanks to XPN and all that they've done for us and the way that they've championed us. There's no doubt about it. And so, yeah, I mean, we're truly grateful. I'm truly indebted.
It's really awesome. Like I said, I was looking at the list going back, and I'm pretty sure there's only one year that I was kind of flaky on, and it was 2013. But I'm pretty sure I caught every single Exponential Music Festival performance you guys did, which it makes me feel very justified in saying this. 2019, as the sun's setting and you guys are closing out the river stage, was without a doubt one of the most phenomenal sets I've ever seen in my life. Like, it was so good. Like, and the crowd singing along it was an absolute experience. Like, I loved it so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, at this time, would you like to go through my little Jauntlet questionnaire? This is my questions that I ask every guest to end every episode, and they're very simple. It starts with the one-hit wonders. Billy Joel or Elton John? Who do you prefer?
It's hard to say. There's certain Billy Joel songs I think that just resonate with me in a very personal way. So I would have to say that, but I feel bad even picking.
Yeah, it's a real Sophie's choice there. Next one, Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Debbie Harry.
Okay, good one. Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Aretha.
All right. Nirvana or Pearl Jam, even though you were TRLing it?
Yeah, even though I was busy. I feel like I'm going to get my ass kicked for saying this, but I'm trying making this a longer answer, but I always just love it when there's a whole universe to just lose myself in. Like when I fell in love with Willie Nelson or Frank Zappa, it's like, oh, there's just so much stuff. And I feel that way about Pearl Jam. Like if you go to their Spotify page and, there's always albums and there's singles and there's compilations. Under compilations, there's like 50 or 100 live albums. They just put them all out there. And there was a period where I'm not even that familiar with the albums, but I was kind of like a deadhead for Pearl Jam, where I was just only listening to like their whole European tour, and I was loving it. So I actually think there's a bigger space in my heart for Pearl Jam than Nirvana. I know that the cool kids are going to crucify me, but that's how I feel.
It's all right. I'm a Pearl Jam guy myself, so you got a friend in me on that one. Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks.
All right. The big one, Beatles or the Stones?
The Stones. Awesome. I love them. I mean, the Beatles taught me how to write songs, but there's just the danger and the sort of sexiness of the Stones, and just the decades and decades worth of changes and drama. That's, like I was saying, like that's the stuff I live for. So even though the Beatles are the Beatles and they kind of set the bar for everyone else, I am more a fan of the Stones saga.
Yeah, definitely. I've said it a lot on this podcast, but to me, like, the Stones are just a better band. Like, the Beatles have like a bunch of geniuses who happen to create with each other for a small period of time and then continue to be geniuses. But the Stones are just a Great band, man.
Yeah, they embody rock and roll in a way that the Beatles don't.
Yeah,
And to me.
definitely. The last one of the one-hit wonders, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
I saw it coming. The Queen love. That was, by the way, that was me when I was in high school. I was the same exact way. Like, I was such an enormous fan. The reason I wanted to play guitar was literally just so I could play the solo from "We Will Rock You." Like, Brian May was like my idol, and I just wanted to be able to, like, because I was like, wouldn't it be cool, like, to be at a sporting event and just be the guy who the only music on the stop clap, you know? Like, but yes. Love me some Queen. The last section is the top 10 countdown. We use Jawn in Philadelphia to be whatever you want it to be. It's person, place, or thing. Doesn't have to be music, can be anything. So the first one, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were little?
I was little. Probably like Star Wars toys, probably. I was like a big action figure kid, so I was always playing with yeah, and Superman comics. That was a big one for me. I had to get them all. So
yeah.
maybe that.
Excellent. Did you have a favorite Star Wars figure?
I remember like Bosk was particularly coveted.
Nice.
When I was with all my nerd friends and we were all trying to find him, that was always one hard to find. I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure it was like at the Target next door, the other Target, but that's just how it felt. It felt like this element of discovery of like, oh, did anyone find it yet? So that one, I think.
Very cool. Number 2, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
I became somewhat of a amateur book collector with and I think it just kind of happened out of touring. I kind of I had way too many books as it was, like all the whatever paperback versions. I was finishing a book and buying 4, that's how much I was buying. So it didn't make sense to keep doing that. And then I got into the game of like, well, I can just buy books I've already read, but just the really nice first editions of them. Obviously I don't go too crazy. I don't get Mark Twain or stuff, that's cost prohibitive, but modern firsts. Like I love finding Don DeLillo. Hi Gus. Don DeLillo or Thomas Pynchon. I love it, and it gives me a great thing to do on tour because used bookstores are kind of one of the last kind of community building cultural spots for sorry.
Oh, look
Gus
at this
here.
little guy. Hey buddy.
Want to say hi? But yeah, so book collecting became a big thing for me.
That's really cool. In my past, I used to work for.
Sorry.
Oh, what do you got there? No, it's awesome. What do you got there?
What is that?
In my past life, I used to work for one of the largest rare and used book resellers on the East Coast, and it was without a doubt.
So you have all the secrets.
I have all the secrets. I do.
You can turn me on to some stuff.
It was a bummer when they went under, like, because it was just I was just surrounded by just brilliant books all the time, and cool. Just the discovery.
I went to the antiquarian book fair a couple days ago here in Pasadena, and it's like I was by like decades the youngest person there, and I just had the time of my life. I love that world. I love all these old grumps that are like, oh, you can't open a brick and mortar anymore, and on it. I just love it.
Yeah,
that world means a lot to me.
It's the best. Number 3, what was your first concert? What was the first live show you ever went to?
First concert, other than like my dad stuff. I'll be right there, buddy. I'll be right there for lunch. Sorry. I went to a bunch of shows for my dad, and then the first big show was at the Irvine Amphitheater. It was Semisonic opened, and then it was not Soul Live. Maybe it was Soul Live. I don't know. I forget what they were called. And then Matchbox 20 was the headliner. It wasn't Soul Live. Soul Live is a fusion band. I forget what they were called. But yeah, Matchbox 20. And I was really in love with the Semisonic album because, again, I was a TRL kid. So Closing Time meant a lot to me. And then Matchbox 20, I knew all those songs too. And yeah, that was it's funny to admit it, but yeah, that was a big seminal moment for me. I was like, that's what I want to do. The curtain came up and there was haze all across the floor, and they're they were all silhouetted they were backlit and silhouetted, which basically every show ever does. So it's not that they were doing anything new, but I was seeing it for the first time and I thought, like, this is really cool. Remember seeing Third Eye Blind at the Greek a few times and just feeling like rock and roll is the coolest thing ever. And it's funny because then the stuff that I got into was all just, once I got older, it was all older. Like you could go see Steely Dan, but you didn't feel like you were witnessing a bunch of rock stars. No offense, but just you weren't. But yeah, so those two moments were big for me.
Very cool. Number 4, what was the last concert you went to? Obviously, other than yourself playing or whatever.
Yeah. What was the last concert I went to? I feel like I just was at something. Gosh, it's so hard with the kids now. I just don't feel like I've seen music in a long time. I'm going to see my friend Paul Spring in New York. He's an amazing songwriter. He has a cool new album. That's on the 25th. And then I found out that we have a day off. We play Cleveland on March 8th, I want to say. And then we play Chicago on March 10th, I want to say, something like that. And I think it's March 9th that Bruce Springsteen plays in Columbus, which is right between the two. So we're going to go see the E Street Band on March 9th, and I'm really excited. It's going to get to do that in the middle of the tour. It's pretty dreamy.
That is awesome. That is cool. Like, make music, ingest music, make music. Like, I like that sandwich. That's awesome. Number 5, what was your favorite concert you ever went to?
Dang, I should have a good answer to that. In 2013, we opened for Bob Dylan for a whole tour.
Wow.
And watching, I feel like a lot of people love to criticize what he does now live. Like, oh, he can't sing, or it doesn't sound like he used to, and I don't like it. Or these songs are unrecognizable. And to me, the way I've always put it is, like, after watching that tour, I feel like it had a profound effect on me because I would watch the set every night. And yeah, some of the songs were very different than any versions I'd ever heard. And he obviously sang in very different ways because his range was a lot more limited. But to me, I really admired it because I feel like so many artists, as they get older, they try to give you some version of what it used to be. So it's like 60% of a 1975 article. But Bob Dylan gives you 100% of a 2013 article. And that's something that really messed me up in a really profound way. And the way that they would play and talk to each other with their instruments within the instrumental sections, like, it wasn't jamming, but it also kind of was. He would do like a 5 or 7 note figure that would kind of fall over the bar in this weird way, and then the lap steel on the guitar would kind of get involved, and they'd all of a sudden there'd be this cool, like, bubbly thing that was happening. Again, no one would call it jamming, but they were jamming, and it was just, they were creating these beautiful shapes. And and to think it was at a Bob Dylan show, like, it was a big deal for me.
That's awesome. Fantastic answer. Number 6, who have you never seen live that you wish you would have? They can be living or dead.
I missed the final Leonard Cohen runs. I never saw him live.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about having gone to see those shows. It sounded like it was a pretty profound experience.
Yeah.
So I'm bummed I never caught that.
Great answer. Number 7, name an unappreciated Jawn, something you wish had a little more shine to it.
Huh. That's an interesting question. So, like, what do other people say? Just so I have an idea.
So, some people will name a band, some people will name an album.
Okay,
some people have named like a feeling, a movie, anything. Like
right.
One of my friends once said kindness, which I thought was fucking beautiful.
And then he's right. I guess for me, something that I love talking about, and I feel like people treat it like meat and potatoes, is Charlie Chaplin movies. I feel like people are always like, oh, that's pretty old timey. I'm like, no, that's what I thought too. And then you watch it and you realize it's as funny and as important and as beautiful and as entertaining as anything you could wish to see now. And yeah, maybe I sound like an old fuddy duddy saying that, but it's weird whenever he comes up and people treat me like I'm a hobbyist. I'm like, no, he was the guy. He was the
Yeah.
Brad Pitt. He was the biggest star there could be. So it's not like I'm hanging out in the fringes. It's just his star is sort of setting, and I don't want it to.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I was talking a few episodes ago with a pal of mine, Zach Eastman, who's a filmmaker, and we were talking about Chaplin. And I was just actually listening to that episode yesterday, and I started thinking about the very first time I ever saw City Lights and just how
Oh,
profoundly moved I was by the end of
yeah,
it. That I was like weeping at a
yeah,
silent film. Like it's just
yeah.
absolutely perfect.
When I got into him, I did it for the sake of like trying to put together some hodgepodge film education. Like, oh, I guess I should. That's kind of how it felt. And then I watched The Great Dictator, and I was overcome. I thought this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. And then the context of when it was released, which was like right in the middle of the World War II, with featuring Adolf Hitler, who he's making fun of, and like all of this context of he's helping the world laugh at our greatest enemy. Like, how incredible is that? Like,
It's
that must be
beautiful.
so much more effective than any battleground.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, that's something that just, I couldn't believe it. And then I had to watch everything in modern times. I even show Gus Chaplin. We let him do some screen time, but we try to keep it limited. But anytime he asks for Papin, is how he says it. I am a sucker, and I'm like, cool. Well, we can do this all day.
That is awesome. That is so cool. Number 8, what's your favorite album?
Favorite album. It's fun to jump around. I mean, I'll say that in my mind, the two that are tied for first place right now are Hejira by Joni and Warren Zevon self-titled.
Wow. I'm pretty sure Hajira was Charlie Hall's pick as well.
Oh, cool.
Uh,
It's like a new thing of music. It's like new kinds of music. It's music you'll
yeah,
never hear somewhere else.
that's awesome. That is so awesome. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they release.
Father John Misty. I
Yeah,
love him so
yeah.
much. Anything he puts out, I'm thrilled to grab a hold of. He's getting older, but I feel that way about Herbie Hancock. My buddy Mike Viola, he's not a big artist, but he just released a new single today, actually, and anything he does, it means more to me than most music I've ever heard. And um, yeah, those are three pretty cool. Oh, Madison Cunningham,
Oh my God, so good.
she's it. Like, she's already to me just historic.
That
And
that riff on Hospital gets stuck in my head for like for hours on end. Like it's just
yeah,
so good.
yeah, she's Griffin, our drummer, has played with her a bunch, and so I've been around her a lot, and now I just don't want to talk to her because I get nervous because she's as good as anyone could ever be.
It's so good. So good. The 10th and final of the top 10 countdown and of the Jauntlet. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? Again, it could be anything you want it to be.
My favorite obsession, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like John. Yeah, sorry, I'm like, it's
No,
fun to.
it's Philly lingo, I
Yeah,
gotta
yeah, yeah. Oh man. I mean, it sounds kind of goofy, and I know I'm really in the thick of it right now, but anytime I get stressed or anxious or a little bit too concerned with the 5-year plan or blah blah blah, once I come back to my concept of family, and for family that I have had, for family that I still have, for family that I hope to have, so it's not something that um it could be a projection, but that idea is always something that I can't revisit enough. That's something that's always so grounding to me. And if I can kind of stay in that headspace, then everything else, it either doesn't matter or it matters through a completely different prism, which is kind of only beautiful and positive.
That's such an amazing answer. So you guys are playing the Fillmore here in Philly on March
Yeah.
16th. Tickets still available and stuff like that. You guys usually have like a 2-year schedule in between albums. Are you kind of thinking about the next one, or are you living with this one for the next year?
Yeah, I have a lot of tunes written. I'm excited about that. My brother and I are building a studio in Altadena where we're going to be living soon, and I love the idea of even upping that output. I love the idea of an album a year, or maybe 2 albums a year. Just kind of keep feeding it. I think that there was a period of time where 2 years felt like the right amount of time for a label to milk it or whatever. And that just seems to be ending. And now with the way that streaming is reframing how the industry works, it just seems like you can't do enough. Like it would be fine if you release something every month. It's so much, it seems like it's more community based. Like if you have the community, which we're lucky enough to have, then we're not going to overexpose, And so I love the idea of really ratcheting up our output.
That's awesome. Ever any solo stuff, or when you write, do you just immediately think it's Dawes?
I mean, this band is so fun to be in, and they're family in some cases, in one case, quite literally. And it's like when I write a song, if I want there to be piano, I just couldn't imagine preferring anybody instead of Lee. Or if there's going to be drums, I wouldn't want it to be anybody except Griffin. And then as some of our songs show on some of our records, like a song like St. Augustine, if there shouldn't be anything except for me and guitar, then that's what it'll be. So it's hard to justify or to rationalize the idea of stepping away from the thing,
Yeah.
Maybe someday, if we need it as an excuse to just go play more shows or release something right on the heels of a Dawes record, but no one wants to let us, maybe we can release it under my own name or something. But me needing to like get away and get a breath of fresh air, like I haven't had that feeling ever.
No, that makes sense. That makes absolute sense. I mean, it is named after you, so like, so I guess you feel comfortable enough to not. But Taylor, thank you so much for doing this today and sitting down and chatting with me. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. Is there anything you'd like to leave these folks with today?
No, just as David Letterman likes to say, may all your favorite bands stay together.
My many thanks again to Taylor for joining me on the show today. Dawes' new album, Misadventures of Doomscroller, is available now on vinyl and streaming on all of the major streaming platforms. And the Philly leg of the Evening with Dawes tour hits the Fillmore on Thursday, March 16th. Tickets are still available. If you want to find more about Taylor and Dawes, you can visit www.dawestheband.com. Follow them on Facebook at facebook.com/DawesFB, on Instagram at DawesIG, and on Twitter at DawesTwitter. Links to all of those are in the show notes. If you have not done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. And guys, don't forget, it is never too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for Citizenship of the World just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn for articles, merchandise, and links to all of the previous episodes of this podcast. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight to your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at YoThat'sMyJawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out and touch some Jawn. Oh man, yeah, I'm kind of feeling this new episode every week thing. So what the heck? We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
Hey yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Your taste in music doesn't have to be.
Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production, written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by Phil Tyler Music featuring Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Natalie Runkle, and the incredibly brilliant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com. Or you can leave an audio message for us and possibly hear yourself on a future episode by visiting anchor.fm/YTMJ/message. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure and shout to the world, yo, that's my Jawn.